Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm David Schuetz, Darth Null, and I'm here to talk a little bit about some fun project I've been playing with off and on over the summer involving Raspberry Pis and cars and the Apple TV. And let me say, we're starting a little late because I've been mucking about with the network. I really hope people sacrifice goats at lunch because we're going to need it. I'm a senior consultant in Intrepidus Group. Since about a year or so, we were bought by NCC Group, who also owns Montesano and ISEC Partners. So we all have a little bit of overlap. Our company does an awful lot of mobile application testing, web app testing, stuff like that. I tend to focus on iOS. 3 other guys in my company spoke at this con. They're big Android people. Any of that interests you, we're always hiring. So long car trips. I'm kind of old, so when I went on long car trips, I had all kinds of crazy things to play with. Very, very early electronic toys, invisible inks, the ever fun license plate game, stuff like that. This is what my kids have. It's a little bit different. Nostalgia just cannot compete with this. My boys love Minecraft. When I first got it for them, we haven't really been using it on computers. I've been using it on the Pocket Edition on iPhone, old iPhones and stuff like that. And all they would do is just build and explore, build up, tear down, build up, tear down. And then they started shooting chickens, and now they've got lava, and the Pocket Edition keeps getting more and more interesting. So back in the spring, I said, hey, wait, I should figure out a way to let the kids play Minecraft with each other in the car. I've got a Raspberry Pi, I've got an access point, or a wireless card, I'll stick them together. They can play Minecraft with each other. Then I got a little crazy. So I'm going to give you a quick overview of some of the simple features that are on there, most of which are pretty well understood, and then a deep dive into the fun stuff that I did later in the summer, which was integrating it into the Apple TV. So what do you need? Well, I started off with a Raspberry Pi, the Raspberry Pi OS, and a Linksys wireless adapter that's probably about 5 years old that I just happen to have lying about in my drawer. By pure luck, this one actually functions as an access point. I'm not a huge Wi-Fi geek. I kind of know enough to be dangerous, and I do know that not all chipsets support being an access point. I was glad this one did. Apparently, you can get some now that are just not a whole lot bigger than the USB connector itself, so it barely has any profile. That's what I'm going to have to move to eventually. You need basic software to make sure your adapter works. You got to run DHCPD on it, host APD. I'm not even bothering with things like NAT and firewall because it's just a standalone network in the car. And like I said, there's lots of step-by-step guides to do this. I found probably a half dozen people that have done things like that. This was simple. This took me an hour. But then I started thinking, you know, when we go on these trips, we've got DVDs. We don't have them in a pile of boxes. We've got one of those thick wallets with 100 different DVDs. And of course, when you start them, you've got to kind of lean back and, not the driver, lean back and use the little menu and stuff like that. And oh wait, it's starting. No, that's an ad. No, that's an FBI warning. And meanwhile, the kids are yelling. So let's put movies on the Raspberry Pi. They've all got their own iStuff. Let's put a DLNA server on the Raspberry Pi. They can watch movies on their little things with little headphones and stuff. That was pretty easy too. I was just using, I guess, the standard, is it pronounced Raspbian? I don't know, the Raspberry Pi Debian. And you can just install mini DLNA. There's a conf file in Etsy that you have to put different things in, tell it where your media folders are. And then just whatever content that your clients can display. Since we're doing iOS devices, it's M4V and stuff like that. Great app on the Mac called Handbrake that just converts everything for me. And there's all kinds of clients on iOS, but most of them are kind of weird, kind of clunky. It was hard finding something that I really liked. But there's stuff out there. And theoretically, this should work with a DLNA-capable TV, but of course, you can't put that in the car. So here's what it looks like in action. And you can see there where I said the wireless card, the wireless adapter is a little bit too big. It's the length of the whole Raspberry Pi, for Pete's sake. So I've got to improve that. But there it is running on, running a movie on an iPhone. So what happens when the batteries die? Because they will, and I don't have long enough iPod charger cables to go to every seat in the car. Well, I mentioned the whole ceiling-based thing. We've got a video input for composite video and standard RCA in, so let's just put a media player right on the Raspberry Pi, and we can play a movie for everybody in the car. Turns out putting Xbox Media Center on the Raspberry Pi isn't as easy as I would hope. There's a lot of pre-built images out there that are dedicated, they're geared towards being an Xbox Media Server. It turns your Raspberry Pi into one. And they basically replace the whole OS. There are some packages that are out there, and here's a link to one of them, that are meant to just load on the regular Raspberry Pi OS. And they work, but it's a little bit slow. I think the Raspberry Pi might be a little bit underpowered. And of course, you have to control it with something. There's no mouse on my entertainment system in the car. So you've got to have an iPhone that you can then talk to Raspberry Pi on the web interface and control it with that. But I did this, I think it was a trip in August, I got this part working, and it worked pretty good. Side note, Xbox Media Center grabs the program information about the things that it's displaying live. So of course, as soon as you start it up in the car and you don't have internet access, it says, hey, I can't talk to anybody. Like, I don't care. And then when it does connect to the network, if you're actually connected to a real network ahead of time, it pulls down information about the videos based on the file name of the video, not based on all the nice iTunes tags I painstakingly added. And sometimes it's completely wrong. Like, I had a video that came off a Disney DVD, which was an old Disney movie of the Grand Canyon Suite, nice piece of classical music, all kinds of animals and snow and rain and stuff. And it thought it was a Kevin Costner movie. So it just works, or doesn't work as well as you like. There's lots of old libraries out there. I figured this would be great. Easy to fix. There's libraries for reading ID3 tags. There's not a lot of good libraries for reading MP4 tags. There's a whole lot of them out there. They're all old. They're all unmaintained. I couldn't get them to run on the Raspberry Pi, so please, someone fix this. Drives me crazy. The other problem that I ran into when I put it in the car is the volume was really, really, really quiet. And some of this might be an issue with the level out from the Raspberry Pi, plus the 10-foot long cable I had to go to the back of the minivan where it plugged into the aux port in the back. But I found that you could adjust the mix down level because everything's stored on my card in AC3 surround. I had to mix it down to stereo. It does some magic as it's doing that, and it attenuates as it's doing that. So I had to add some additional gain back to it. And that was a pain in the neck because I had to SSH in from an iPad, do this stuff, tweak it, reboot it, start the movie again. The kid's like, why are you starting again, Daddy? And then it gets loud, and then all of a sudden you hear all this clipping. You got to do it again, put the number down. It works, but it just wasn't great. So what happens at the end of your trip when you get to the rental house? If you're like us and you go to the beach every year, you rent a house and they've got the big stack of AV equipment that's just held together with spit and baling wire and a whole bunch of old VHS tapes, and there's no video recorder anywhere in the house anyway. So he's just got this mess. Well, why don't we bring the Apple TV? It's small, it's got Netflix on it, which the kids love, and most of the rental houses we go to have Wi-Fi. But now if I want to bring all of my movies, I need to bring my own iTunes server. And I really probably shouldn't use my laptop for that, at least not my work laptop. So let's put the Raspberry Pi on the Apple TV. Quick word about how Apple TV's applications work. I interchangeably call them channels or feeds or apps. Not sure what the official word is. But they're not actually compiled binaries. You don't actually write an application in Xcode, compile it, sign it, spit it onto the device. It's actually a web-based application. All the information comes from a remote server as XML with JavaScript attached. The Apple TV binary, just a single binary on the Apple TV device, processes the XML, processes any JavaScript, which then modifies the DOM and then ends up displaying it on the screen. There are ways that people have found to sneak into this. Some folks did a couple of Chinese hackers did it a couple years ago. And more recently, earlier this year, and especially in June, I think it got a lot of press, some folks with the Plex media server came up with a nice trick where you basically intercept requests to trailers.apple.com. You have your Apple TV set up so the DNS points to your server. It passes everything by unless it's trailers, which point it points it to your own server, and it spits back all the XML data for the application that you want. It works, and it's very nice. But there's some issues. You can't change the icon or name. It still shows up as trailers, that little thing up in the corner that would look red if our projector wasn't weird today. You can only do it for one external app at a time. So you hijack trailers, and that goes to your app. You can hijack additional channels, and people have been playing with using the Wall Street Journal app or some other thing. So you can hijack additional apps, but then you, again, lose all those other apps, too, which is bad because I kind of like having the trailers app. And then early in September, Apple changed some things, and they didn't change anything on the device. They changed things on the server side. So the device would reach out, grab the first page of trailers, pull it down, and it would say, I gotta do this, I gotta do this, oh, I gotta do this from HTTPS. And now all of a sudden it needs an SSL connection to go out to Apple. And that wouldn't work because the cert that was coming back wasn't signed. So they put on a self-signed cert. That didn't work because it needed to be CA, so they had to load a CA. That didn't work because it didn't say apple.com, so they forged an apple.com cert, signed it with their own CA, stuck it on the box, and now it works again. Kind of a pain. But there's a lot of official channels out there. There's been a lot more coming out in the last several months. As a matter of fact, just Before I left on Wednesday, I turned on the Apple TV at home, like, oh my God, there's two new channels. How do these things get out there? Obviously, they're working with Apple in order for Apple to put them on the device in the first place. But who's writing the apps? Is Apple developing them? Okay, maybe. But if they're not developing them, then how do these people test their code? Think about that. You've got a program you need to put on a device, and nobody can put apps on the device. So how in the world do you test it on the device? There's got to be a way. Maybe we could use a simulator. Everything's in XSL or XML, and I like XSL. I'm kind of strange. So let's make a simulator. I wrote a simple little Python script, really, really ugly hack, that just pretends to be sort of a brain dead, I don't even want to call it a proxy because that's probably offensive to anybody who's actually written a real proxy. But it takes in a link, sees it comes from a remote site, goes out, grabs it, pulls it down. If the result is XML, it says, okay, I'm going to turn this into HTML. Applies an XSL transform, attaches a CSS style sheet, spits it back to the browser displays it. And it works reasonably well for simple things. For the more complicated applications that actually do JavaScript and so on and so forth, I'm not handling any of that. Ideally, this should be done as a dedicated application that really does all the magic, that actually takes the JavaScript, processes it, modifies the DOM, etc. That's kind of what it looks like in a browser. I got to the point where the Trailers app worked almost flawlessly in a browser. And you could go through, you can even click on play, and in Chrome it would show in a little window, and Safari would actually fill the screen, and it looked good. It was very nice. But even a perfect simulator is still just a simulator. Even if they've got a dedicated application that does all the magic, all the XSL, all the JavaScript work, it's still not going to replicate what's on the device. So how do you put things on it? And I thought, well, can you sideload stuff? I'd think that people would have found a way to upload stuff directly from USB. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe there's a profile-based install sort of system, because you can install profiles using Configurator app. Maybe something using MDM, which is something I played with in the past. So let's start hacking. I really hadn't done a lot with jailbroken Apple TVs. I've been playing with iOS for a while, and it's been my job for a few years now. But this past spring, I got an Apple TV, a jailbroken one off eBay, and I started playing with it a little bit. And then when this Plex hack got a lot of publicity in June, I started digging a lot deeper. I started looking especially at the Apple TV binary itself, not the whole system, but in user applications, appletv.app, that binary, the actual application that is running right now on the Apple TV. And it's interesting because I've been doing this for a long time. And one thing that's kind of consistent in all the feature hunting that I've been doing is strings. In 81, I was doing hex dumps and disassemblers, and then in 93, and even today, one of the first things I do when I look in an app is look for strings, see what kind of neat stuff is in there. So what's interesting in the Apple TV binary? I found a whole bunch of stuff. Strings for enable add site, menu icon, loaded via add site, add profile. I cut off a little bit there, but you see unable to load extra internet sites, enter the URL if pointing to a vendor bag, verify it ends in bag plist. Site name, enter the site name. This is all obviously some way in the Apple TV app to add external data to the device. So the trick is to figure out how to make that work. I also looked at how application settings are stored. I mentioned that all the apps run in the single Apple TV binary. So unlike most iOS applications where you get an entitlement to the keychain and you can write credentials to a keychain and only this app can read it, they're all running in the same context. They all have access technically to the same file system data. So there's JavaScript calls that get called to the Apple TV binary that then reaches out to the file system and stores and retrieves preferences from the file system in this long path library application support front row merchants. So if you go into the Netflix folder there, you'll find a preferences.plist, which has got all kinds of information. Also, there's configuration settings on iOS. And people have been playing with that for a while, doing all kinds of neat things. Some of it is simple and obvious using Configurator or MDM. Some of it is a little bit more complicated, hidden features. You can download special plists from Apple if you can find the right site, which I always lose. And that will turn on debugging things like map debugging and stuff like that. I found a really nice, very, very useful file in Private Library System Frameworks, Managed Configuration Framework, called alloweddefaults.plist. And here I just show a section that starts off com.apple.frontrow, but there's com.apple.this, something that, all kinds of different destinations for preferences to go to. And it just lists all the preference settings that are allowed for that that device. So here this is telling me the front row app, which front row was a name for the sort of the media center that used to come shipped with OS 10. There's things like log paths, enable feature enabler, skip what's new, device name. Device name, you change that, it changes what it says. It no longer says, you know, family room Apple TV, it says David's Apple TV. I found some neat ones like print bit rate, home sharing diagnostics. We'll talk a little bit about those later, but this was a gold mine of information. So I've talked about configuration files. What do configuration files look like? They're what Apple calls, and I keep saying this word plist, which is property list. It's basically an XML file, or it can be, there's a binary format as well. That's just a list of keys and values, and some of the values can be arrays or dictionaries and things like that. A mobile config file is just a big plist in a particular format with a particular amount of data. There's a bunch of stuff at the top and bottom that I cut out of here that, you know, kind of defines this is the name of the property or the file, the UUID of the file, and just some general stuff. The important part is what's there inside that payload content key. And inside that, and I can't remember exactly where I derived this from. I think it was just from hacking stuff coming out of configurator. You end up with defaults domain name, and that's that com.apple.frontrow, which we had seen back here. So I'm saying when I want to apply a profile setting to com apple front row, then the next dictionary next key is a defaults data dict, and inside that is a key and a value, and a key and a value, and a key and a value. So that's what I need to change. I need to find all those settings and put them in there. So how do I test this? The official way to put a profile onto an Apple TV is using something called Configurator app, which came out a couple years ago. You basically unplug the Apple TV, plug it into your Mac with a USB cable, launch Configurator app, create the profile, send it via the app into the Apple TV, unplug it from the computer, plug it back into the TV again, and see if it worked. That's going to take a long time. What else can we do with this? Well, as I mentioned, I know a little bit about MDM. So let's do that. Perfect. We can do that. No, you can't. Well, you can under iOS 7, but I haven't looked at that yet. But under iOS 6, Apple TV's version 5.2, 5.3, I could install the profile. It would recognize, it would say it's there, but it wouldn't then go on to the server and say, okay, I want to enroll. It would never actually make the step to go from the device back to the MDM server and join the MDM. But enough information was there that the device thought it was enrolled, and the MDM daemon was running, so I could actually get onto a jailbroken device and manually force a poll, cause the device to say, oh, I've got data waiting for me at the server, reach out to the server, figure out what's happening, and come back. So I rewrote my MDM server to do this. Every time it gets pulled, it spits back a profile. The next time it gets pulled, it spits back the same profile, and I just changed a little bit. So for the first variable name, first preferences setting, I say, okay, let's send back true. Don't do that. Send back true. Okay, now let's send back false. Now let's send back an array of negative numbers. Now let's send back a dictionary. Now let's send back gobbledygook. I figured this would be great. I'll just run through this, and anything that's bad is going to spit out an error. Anything that doesn't spit out an error, I'll look at more closely. The whole process of sending the profiles back and forth worked great. The actual errors didn't work. It didn't throw virtually any errors at all. It was very forgiving. I could set free movies for life equals true and would say, okay, sure, we'll set that, and it doesn't do anything. So I had to go even deeper. So I pulled out IDA Pro and spent about a week, well, okay, maybe a couple of hours, completely decompiling the file. It sure felt like a week. And it dumped out a 238 megabyte C file. Slowed Sublime Editor to a complete crawl when I tried to load this up. Found some neat stuff, though. For example, in this snippet of code, we're looking at the general view controller for, now they're calling it back row. There's front row, there's back row, there's Apple, it's all kinds of crazy nomenclature. For back row event action. So basically, if you're in the Apple TV and you're in the settings menu and you push a button, this is what gets called when you're in the general menu. First thing it says is, okay, what row am I on? And then it says, adjust that number that you just gave me based on whether or not there's hidden items in the menu. So you might be on row 5, but if there's a hidden item at row 4, you're really on row 4. Hidden items, that's kind of neat. Then it says, okay, what did they just do? Give me the remote action from the remote. And then through eventual trial and error, I came up to learn that if they hit 10, which means play, and the current row that you're on is 9, which is send data to Apple, then show the show installed profile screen. which is a very nice trick, and you'll see that in a minute. A couple other things, if you're on the About view and you have Wi-Fi enabled, you're actually on Wi-Fi, not on a wired Ethernet, you can hit the, I thought I had that written in there, I think it's the up arrow, and it will toggle a little display at the bottom that gives you the BSS ID, the current Wi-Fi channel you're on, and under the newest version of the iOS, it'll give you the Bonjour device ID. If you go to the general view controller, you can highlight About, hit right, right, left toggle, or right, right, left select. That puts it into some kind of retail mode that I haven't quite figured out what it's supposed to do. If you go to the send data to Apple, like I said, if you hit play, it goes to the profile page. If you hit right arrow, it shows a little device ID on the screen. So here's kind of what they look like. Again, if you're in the About and you just hit the up arrow, that little bit there in the red will toggle from blank to Wi-Fi channel to BSS ID to blank to. This is the device diagnostic ID. The way that I was grabbing the screenshots off the jailbroken device, it basically does a frame grab of some form from the screen buffer. And that diagnostic ID didn't show up, it was just blank, so I had to take a picture with the phone. And I blanked it out just because if I didn't, somebody would say, hey, look, there's your secret ID. And again, the fun one. If you go to send data to Apple and instead of hitting select, you hit play, you get a list of profiles. Well, the first thing you'd see is nothing, you'd just say add profile. And then you add a profile, and as you add them, you get lists of things you've installed. What are the things you can do with a profile? Well, again, I saw all these great little settings in there. One was print bitrate equals true, and that gives you a little display. It actually bounces from corner to corner, so it took me a few tries to get it in the right corner while it was close enough to an interesting picture that I could take a shot with the phone. Shows you your bandwidth usage, how many drops you've had, stuff like that, resolution of the video. Home sharing diagnostics, if that's true, it turns on a hidden menu under computers that lets you look for all the home sharing devices in your network and gives you some special IDs and stuff like that. I'm sure this is helpful to somebody. My home sharing, for some reason, stopped working. So I'm like, hey, I got diagnostics. Let's see. It didn't help me a damn bit. I still don't know what was going on. Something called Enable Feature Enabler, which puts another hidden menu on the general item called Enable Feature Enabler. And you go in there and it says enter feature code. And I can never figure out what to do with this. I did find the generation of some crazy SHA-based hash based on certain information in the various applications that are being collected from Apple. But I don't know if that's what the feature code is supposed to be, if this is a way to maybe enable applications that are present on Apple, but they're not enabled, they're not activated. I'm not sure. This is something that'd be really fun to dig into a little more. You can also use this to create a man-in-the-middle proxy. Just in iPhone configuration utility or configurator, create a proxy. It's got to be on Wi-Fi, include an HTTP proxy, stick it in. You have to actually install it while you're on the wired Ethernet, and then make sure you boot up. And you saw before I was saying we had to have the network long enough to get the icons. If you just boot straight to Wi-Fi and that profile is there, it won't be able to get those icons because of signature issues on SSL, and you won't get anywhere. So you install an Ethernet, make sure you get everything going, then you pull the plug and it automatically flips over to Wi-Fi, and now you're man-in-the-middling all your traffic. Some apps will break, some apps won't, and you can see what things are doing. But what about this enable ad site? What does that do? That's still very, very intriguing. Well, interestingly, back in June when they released a whole bunch of apps, one of the apps that they added to the Apple TV was Sky News. I thought, oh, British news, let's go see what that looks like. And there's a small, short little 2-minute video on there about Apple TV and what you can do with it and how they're proud to be on it. And at one point in that little piece, they panned across a conference room table overlooking their studio, and there's a great big flat TV there with some interesting things on it. You can see the Sky News. Oh, wow, the red is gone. Second row down, all the way on the left is Sky News. That's the application that for that network. 2 over from that, you can kind of read it, is the WWDC application. So this came out in the middle of June, because that's when they added the app to the Apple TV to support the Worldwide Developer Conference. A couple weeks later, it disappeared. And then in the bottom right, you really can't see it, is an empty tile, and underneath it is the word Add Site. So this preference setting apparently adds a button to the home screen on the Apple TV called Add Site. But if I use that key in a profile, it doesn't do anything. Something else is going on. Obviously, it looks like it's supposed to be an official profile key. It's listed in the list of my Rosetta Stone allowed defaults, but it's not working. So let's go back to IDA. Let's find the code that looks for that key. What could it possibly, oh, there it is. Add site is enabled. It's a little Boolean that says, are you there? Yes, I am. The first thing this routine does is it says, give me all of your preferences. So it goes to, opens up a class to shared front row preferences. Looks for this key. Now, you don't see the key in the source code, you see a memory reference, but that references back to this long random string, which is also back in that UDID, or allowed defaults list. If that key exists, and it's a dictionary, it's not returning true or false, it's returning a dictionary of values. So if that key returns a dictionary, and if the dictionary has a subvalue called enable add site that's true, then yes, add site is enabled. So this is what it looks like. You end up with, again, a set of defaults going to com.apple.frontRow, a dictionary key called f2be, et cetera, and subkeys in there called enable add site, value of true, and add site logging URL is an optional one, and you can point that to a log where diagnostic data goes to. Excellent. After you do this, you restart the Apple TV, you click on add site, you get that message I saw before about, enter path to vendor bag and with .plist, et cetera. Or if you want, you can just give a URL directly to the app's homepage and just what you're going to call the app. Interesting trick, though. It doesn't have to be an application you wrote. Back in August, there was all kinds of rumors about Vivo coming out for the Apple TV. I said, let's look for that. So I looked for atv.vivo.com, appletvvivo.com, et cetera, et cetera. When I went to Apple TV Vivo, I got a server error. So that name existed in the real world in the DNS. I added bag.plist to the URL, and boom, out came the configuration file. Went over to Apple TV, typed it in, and now I've got Vivo on my Apple TV, like a week before it was formally released. So there it is. Don't ask what's in the black spot. That app hasn't been released yet. It was like, cool, hey, and let's try this other one, and boom, boom. So I got two in like 2 minutes, but that one still hasn't come out, so I'm not going to talk about it. I'm sorry? It was not, no. So what is in the bag.plist file? It's, again, another property list file. It defines what the application looks like. One thing you can do with these is you can define screensaver settings. The applications can actually provide data to the device just to provide pictures for screensavers, which looks like it could be kind of neat. I haven't played with that yet. But the big things are the menu title, the merchant name. Merchant name is what you use for storing the preferences in the file system. The root URLs for the app. If you want examples, go look for bags out there. There's a whole bunch out there. Trailers.apple.com has got a bag.plist. That's probably the easiest one to look for. So again, how is an app built? As I said before, it's all XML. And they actually have a full XSD on the file system. If you have a jailbroken device, you go to applications, appletv.app, atv.xsd. If you don't have a jailbroken Apple TV, go to, I don't remember what it's called, it's the iPhone Wiki. Has a list of all the various firmwares for all the various iOS devices. You can go down there, find an Apple TV second generation firmware link, download that, and because it's second generation, boot ROM exploits work, which means we can get the decryption keys, which means we can open it up in a file system, just mount that file system on your box, find this file. And it'll tell you all the structure that you need to build apps. That's kind of fun, though. I did a Google search for Apple TV and bag.plist, and I found a Fox News app. Doesn't really work, but it's there, and it says Fox News. It's got links to it. You could actually get a couple of videos through it. Inside that app was another file that pulled down some JavaScript data from a completely different site on Amazon S3. I went to that site, and I did a little digging, and eventually found the entire Apple TV sample application. So I just downloaded all that, and boom, I've got a great big busy box that shows me all kinds of stuff. What all the menus look like, what all the various grids of movie icons look like, different ways to change the text weights. I actually found a link to a different site on the Plex Connect forum that had a much newer version. This was actually from like 5.0 or 5.1. All right, let's see, here's the fun. Might be. All right, let's see if I turn off mirroring. Now I should be on the Apple TV. Okay. I've been more nervous about this talk than I have for any other talk, and I think it's just because of the complexity of the demo. Okay, so I'm in general. I go down to send data to Apple. And there's that thing that, oh wait. Did you see it? Secret device ID? All right. If I hit select, It gives me that. It says, okay, you can send us stuff. Yeah, I really don't want to send you stuff. But if you hit play, it says add profile. Okay, let's add a profile. Are you sure you want to add a profile? Adding a profile as you collect the diagnostic information, et cetera. So I imagine that they kind of left this facility in case you're having some really crazy problems and you wanted to diagnose it. Apple could point you to a profile that would download diagnostic data or something like that. But I've never heard of anybody doing this. And you go to any Apple help site, they all say use configurator. I've never seen them document this. I have seen the diagnostic ID documented, but I haven't seen this documented publicly. So let's see. Is that the right URL? That should be. Before I embarrass myself, let me look at it in a browser. 227.80.80. Can anybody tell me the significance of 227 as the last octet? 22 over 7 is a rough approximation of pi. All right, fine. I'm old school. I use numbers for everything, so I want to have something that I can remember. Okay, so I hit submit, adds the profile. If I come down here, it says there's a profile loaded. The description of the payload is default description. I don't know what that means. Anyway, it's there. And if I come back out to the main menu, I probably won't see it yet. By the way, this is a jailbroken device because I need to SSH into it to test things for the talk, but it doesn't need to be jailbroken. I've actually got a video, which I might post to YouTube eventually, of me unboxing a brand new Apple TV from shrink wrap, hooking it all up and loading an app. Okay, so what we'll do is go over here and back to this. And I hope this doesn't screw with our videos we're recording. We'll see what happens. I would sing and dance, but you don't want to see that. No, you don't. No, especially not on video. Good Lord. I should have thought of things to talk about while this is happening. No, I'm not going to. That's not my story. That's Bruce's story. I don't have any story. I'm not going to tell Bruce's story. Magnesium and fire is cool. We can cast a shadow on the tree canopy if you throw a little block of magnesium that big into a hot campfire. It's nice. And everybody just instinctively backs away. All right, I did something. We getting it? Okay, it's showing up down there, so now the projector has to sync up. The code on the Raspberry Pi to serve to the Apple TV is just a Python script that's spitting out XML. So very simple, very little to it, and very little to my actual code also. Okay, so we're back. I have to think a minute. I have to point right. And there you go. Add site. What's interesting is that has been a blank icon until a week ago. I'll talk about that later. All right, enter the URL of pointing to a vendor bag. Ensure the suffix is bagged.plist. Let's see, hopefully that's the one I want. I tried to preload stuff so that it would be easier. I need to add a T to the end of that. All right, so that's pointing to the Raspberry Pi. Hit submit. And you know what's also weird is with this jailbroken one, for some reason, sometimes this takes longer. Okay, it didn't crash this time. For some reason, and I think it's because I've been doing so much experimentation with it, I think it just got flaky. Okay, and oh God, that looks like hell. That's supposed to be a nice, pretty Raspberry. It looks more like a Blueberry. But there you go. There's a new app on the Apple TV. It's got movies. And you've got the little thing scrolling by. Let's see. Let's go to favorites because the other one will take too long to load all the pictures. And it will play iTunes protected files, but that's kind of flaky. You kind of have to play the files via the standard Apple TV mechanisms first, where it goes out to iTunes and fetches down the keys. But then once you've done that, it's got that cached in memory, and it will play a protected copy of an iTunes file later, maybe, if you're lucky. Plex Connect people have been playing with that a lot, so they might understand it better. But there you go. You've got, I was able to put in all this data. This is why the whole metadata comment was so important to me, because I've got found apps online that will go out to IMDb and pull down descriptions and all the cast and spit it all out in there in pure iTunes format. It's fantastic. But I couldn't get it to work right with the Raspberry Pi. So yeah, you've got all the information there. You hit play. Oh, crap. I added this when I was at the beach. How sad is it that the best applause I get is for an accident? Okay. Because I had this all set up at the beach. We had all kinds of kids and friends' kids and stuff like that. I'm like, yeah, I don't want them to play Inglourious Bastards. That would be bad. So let's try. Oh, there's the Grand Canyon Suite. That is not a Kevin Costner movie. Let's see. Where's one that's not iTunes dependent? Just because I can't remember if I got the iTunes authorizations on here. Oh, that's R2? Good Lord. It's Clint Eastwood. What could be wrong with Clint Eastwood? That one I think I got from a digital copy, which means it's iTunes protected. Okay, this one I ripped. There's a lot of work to see 10 seconds of footage. There you go, it's doing something. Ta-da, Disney. And if I hit the right button on here, you get the chapter listings, which, shoot, this one doesn't have names. If I actually had chapter names, you'd see, instead of chapter 1, it would say intro or this or that, and you can you can bounce through them. I've had some trouble getting subtitles to work properly, and maybe that this one didn't have it, but I've had other ones where there's subtitles, so you can actually get that. So really simple app. The app itself is kind of lousy. But another interesting thing is that it doesn't have to be just about movies. You can put anything you want on here, and it all kind of falls into that same Apple TV application format. So let's go back over here, and this does not need to be on a jailbroken device. And let me make sure this other app is really running. What IP address did I use? 10.8.2004. Oh, come on. That's not answering. Okay, is my server running? Looks like it's running. Let's try again. Thinks it's running. I'm running out of time. Oh, come on. What am I typing wrong? Oh, heh. Okay. All right, so let's go to the laptop instead of the Raspberry Pi. And let's back over here and add a playlist, add a T to that, hit submit, and 6 minutes. Please work. It would be nice if you worked. Okay. There's the Raspberry Pi. There's Confu, which I apologize isn't working this con. So I click on that, and like I said, it doesn't have to be about movies. It could be about security conferences. Let's go down to ShmooCon, and let's pick ShmooCon 7, 2011. You've got the first day, click the right arrow, you see up at the top there the date changes. Now you got the second day, you can go through all these different talks. Let's go back to the first day. Let's go to the only video that I have loaded, which I'm pulling off of archive.org. Hit that. Actually, if you hit up arrow, I think you'll see most of the abstract. A lot of the abstracts are too long to fit on the Apple TV screen anyway. Hit play, and yeah, there's no way in hell this is going to work. I'm sucking it over LTE. Well, it's doing something. And there you go. So if they ever make this official, I really want to make that real. That would be just awesome. All right, let's see if I can get back to mirroring and go back to this and demo. Got about 5 minutes. I'll blow through the end. Okay, this is all the backup slides in case the thing and the movie didn't work. Adding new channel, success, looks up there, movies, details, add confu, blah, blah. Okay. There's a lot of limitations of this, as you might expect, because this isn't designed for end users. It's designed for people developing the apps. You can't remove the channels. You can on the jailbroken device. If you get to the right file, you delete it. But you can't remove channels on the other ones. You have to do a factory reset. But it does survive an OS update, which is kind of nice. It's sometimes a little bit flaky, especially if you've got a whole lot of sites added and the sites no longer exist because they're all things you're testing, going to work, coming home. The logging setting is very, very chatty. It's a general facility for all applications on the system, even the built-in ones. So if you've got this pointed at an external server, your Netflix traffic is going, some kind of logging from Netflix is going to that external server, which might or might not include sensitive information. I haven't seen anything in any of the apps, but obviously if you're using this, you want to point it at a server you can control, or just turn off the logging. Adding feeds, as far as I've been able to tell, is manual. You have to do what you just saw me there. You can't put it in a profile and push it out. And it's a very limited Apple TV interface. It's not, as I said, a generic binary software development kit. But you still get some fair control over the screen using JavaScript. The Weather Channel app that came out in August, I think it was, uses an awful lot of custom layout to do all kinds of things on the screen, and it looks kind of neat. So there's certainly ways you can get around some of that. But for example, I don't think you'll ever get a web browser on here. I don't think. Security concerns, I mentioned log leakage. I mentioned that all the channels run in the same context. They're all part of the Apple TV binary, which means if you can find a way to break out of the JavaScript sandbox, or if you find a bug in the binary, you might be able to read credentials from another application. Finding unreleased apps is kind of a security issue if the people developing these apps don't want you to see it yet. We actually contacted Apple before the talk and said, hey, by the way, we found this. It's not really a security bug, but by the way, you might want to tell people making these apps not to put their configuration at atv.mynetwork.com because somebody could find it. So what's Apple going to do with this? Well, they could say, good job, have fun. Or they could say, okay, shit, next time you're going to need a signed profile. Or maybe they'll say, hey, coming soon, an official channel store. Don't know. What did Apple do last week? I went and I said, hey, look, Apple TV 6.0 is finally out. Let's see what's in there. I pulled down the binary, I decrypted it, I looked at it. That great Rosetta Stone that listed all the available settings is gone. I can't find it anywhere on the file system. I think they're just not using it anymore. I did find a lot of interesting bits in the Apple TV binary. There's a new URL type. There's references to a feedresource.archive, which is maybe some kind of a bundle of application data. But the really cool part is there seems to be a full ad site manager where you can add sites, list the sites that are there, delete sites. It has some kind of method to verify sites, so maybe third-party partners can restrict the availability of their apps only to certain people. It sounds really close to what I might like to see as an official channel store. And does it still work? Not yet. Under the new iOS that just came out last week, none of my settings work. But none of my settings work. It's not just the adding the applications that broke. Also, the diagnostics broke, the print bit rates, all those things stopped working. But all that functionality still seems to be in the binary. So I think what's changed is just that now you have to write the profile to a different location on the device. Instead of going to com.apple.frontrow, it needs to go somewhere else. Or maybe the format of the configuration file has changed. I'm hoping this is just a really simple matter of some folks hitting this for a while and really digging and figuring out the slight change that happened, because I'm sure the functionality is still there. We just have to find a new way to get at it. And I mentioned that icon. It just appeared. Every time that I've been working with this, it's been a blank icon on the screen. And now all of a sudden there's this blue button that says, big plus in the middle. And it was on 5.2 devices and 5.3 on my jailbroken one. So this isn't something that changed on the device. There was apparently always a hook that reached out to Apple to grab the icon, and the icon was never there. Now all of a sudden the icon is there. And maybe that's because they improved the facilities under the newest version. Maybe they really are getting ready to add actual channel management. I don't know. I really hope it's the latter, because this would be cool. And what will hackers do with this? I don't know. I would love to see what they do. The Plex Connect app is really cool. I think they could do a lot of things if they've got more access to the device. I'd love to see folks come up with Amazon Prime. Be interesting to see if people come up with ways to do computer-based training through this, Instructables. I mentioned other networks in here, PBS and Discovery. Since I wrote this slide, Smithsonian was added to the Apple TV. Be interesting to see if you can come up with a way to be like a Chromecast clone. Another thing I thought of is a federated content directory. There's a couple of sites on there like is it available for streaming or something like that, .com, and you just punch in a movie and it says, oh, it's here and it's here and it's here. Since this is all web-based, maybe you could say, hey, I want to watch such and such a movie. Oh, it's on Netflix. Oh, click that and it'll launch the Netflix app and load the video. Might be possible, might not be possible, might have to do CSRF to make it happen, I don't know. But it'd be cool if we could see things like that. What's next for me? I'd love to make this thing recognize the home IP when I drive home. If we talk back to the Raspberry Pi, I'd love to have it recognize my access point when I get home and say, hey, we're home, sync up, move movies. I really should put in a cellular hotspot because, well, number one, if I use my phone to control the media center and start a movie, now I no longer have internet access. Number two, because my phone is now bound to the local access point. Number two, it'd be kind of nice if the kids had internet access because then they say, are we there yet? I could say, look out the window. And they said, well, when will we be there? I say, look at Google Maps. Minecraft server would be fun. Improved hardware, adding an external SSD. I've actually got an external drive there. It'd be great if I had a little bit better hardware because the Raspberry Pi is a little underpowered for this. It'd be nice if it had onboard SATA. But it's hard to find a good mix of everything. I haven't found anything that's got SATA and the composite video and HDMI video. So I may need to kind of split the functionality where I've got something for the car and then something I take on vacation to the rental house. It may just have to be two systems. But it's a fun toy. I've used it a couple times already. Really excited about the Apple TV stuff. I would love to see what people do with this. And I think that's about it. I'll have some stuff up on GitHub today or tomorrow. That's it.